The moon hung low over the water, a pale sentinel casting silver light across the vast, glassy ocean. Gentle waves whispered against the shore, their rhythm steady like the earth breathing slowly in its sleep. The night was cool, but not cold, the kind of night that invited thoughts to drift like sea foam, dissolving into the hush of the tides. Somewhere far off, a gull cried, a single note that dissolved into the quiet like a memory almost forgotten. Mara sat barefoot on the edge of the old wooden pier, the damp boards creaking softly beneath her as she swung her legs above the water. She wore a knit sweater that still smelled faintly of cedarwood and campfires, her fingers tracing the grooves in the wood absent-mindedly. The ocean had always been her place of peace ever since she was a child. It was where the world softened, where time felt slower and her thoughts clearer. Tonight, though, there was a weight behind her eyes, the kind that comes from long days filled with waiting and wondering. Behind her, the sleepy town of Westmere dozed quietly. The lanterns lining the boardwalk flickered, casting warm pools of amber across the planks. Shops were shuttered, signs swaying gently in the salt-laced breeze. Even the oceanfront inn where she was staying had gone still, save for the slow rustle of curtains and the occasional creak of floorboards. Everyone else had gone to bed hours ago. Everyone but her and him. She hadn't seen Noah in 5 years. Not since that last summer before everything changed, before life pulled them in opposite directions with the quiet, ruthless strength of the tide. They were young then, brimming with dreams too big for a town this small. She had left for the city. He had stayed. But tonight, for the first time in years, she had returned, drawn back by something she couldn't name. Maybe it was the pull of nostalgia, or maybe it was the letter. It had arrived 2 weeks ago, handwritten in the careful script she remembered so well. No return address, just a date and a place. April 12th, 11 p.m., the old pier. And a single sentence that clung to her heart like sea salt on skin. I'll be there if you will. So she came, not knowing if he truly would, not knowing if he was the same, not even knowing if she was. The air shifted behind her, a soft crunch of footsteps on gravel. Mara turned, her breath catching, heart fluttering with the kind of nervous excitement that lives somewhere between hope and heartbreak. And there he was. Noah stood at the edge of the light, hands tucked into the pockets of his weathered jacket, hair a little longer, eyes just the same tired, kind storm gray. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her like he was making sure she was real. You came, he said softly, voice like the ocean itself, familiar, deep, and a little rough around the edges. I wasn't sure you'd be here, she replied, rising slowly, unsure whether to laugh or cry. But I hoped. They stood facing each other for a long moment, the quiet stretching between them, not awkward, just full of things unsaid, of summers past and memories stitched into every board of the pier. He walked toward her slowly, as if afraid one sudden move would scatter the fragile peace of the moment. She met him halfway. I never stopped thinking about you, he said, and there was no trace of dramatics in his tone, just plain truth, the kind that anchors itself deep. I always thought I'd move on. I tried. But some people, some things, they never leave you. Mara felt something shift inside her, like the tide turning. She reached for his hand, and it felt the same warm, steady grounding. I didn't come back to find what we had, she whispered. I came back because I never really left it behind. A faint smile ghosted his lips, and they stood there, letting the silence speak for them. Above, the stars blinked lazily, scattered like seashells across the velvet sky. The wind hummed through the kept singing their ancient lullaby. But just as calm began to settle in her chest, something in the distance caught her eye, a flicker of movement near the rocks at the edge of the cove. Noah turned too, his gaze narrowing. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A figure, a shadow, really moved again, ducking behind one of the larger stones. Mara felt the hairs on her arms rise, not out of fear exactly, but unease. Noah squeezed her hand gently. "Stay here," he said, stepping away. "No, wait," she called, but he was already striding toward the shore, his footsteps nearly silent on the sand. The figure didn't run, didn't even hide. It stepped out slowly, as if it had been waiting. A woman older than them, her coat whipping in the wind, her eyes dark and unreadable. "Noah," she said, voice low, trembling. "It's me." He stopped cold. Mara couldn't hear the rest, just their hushed voices tangled with the waves, the woman's hands trembling as she held something out to him, an envelope. Noah didn't take it at first. He just stood there, frozen. Eventually, he returned, the envelope tucked under one arm. His face was pale, the piece from earlier now veiled in shadow. "She said it's from my brother," he said quietly. "Your brother?" Mara echoed, confused. "But I thought he died," Noah finished. "At sea, years ago. But she says he left this for me, and she's been waiting all this time to deliver it. She said tonight was the right night." His voice was distant, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle that no longer had all its pieces. Back on the pier, they sat side by side, the envelope resting between them like a ghost. Noah opened it slowly, the paper inside creased and weathered with age. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I'm gone, and the ocean has taken me like it takes all things eventually. But don't warn me. I lived my life with the wind in my sails. Just promise me one thing, don't waste your days waiting. If you love someone, tell them. If you're lost, go back to where you were last found." Mara's hand found his again, and he looked at her not with the ache of the past, but with the clarity of now. The ocean hummed around them, wrapping them in its calm. There were still things to heal, still time needed to unravel the old knots. But for tonight, on the edge of the world, beneath a sky full of stars and the soothing breath of the sea, they were no longer alone. And somewhere in the gentle lull of the waves, the past was finally quiet. The wind picked up slightly, carrying with it the scent of salt and seaweed, the cool air tangling Mara's hair as she tucked it behind her ear. She leaned back against the weathered boards, the night stretching on like an unspoken promise. The ocean, her constant companion, murmured its song, as though it too was content to let the past fade into the horizon. Noah sat beside her, his eyes still on the envelope, the fragile edges of the letter curling slightly under his fingers. He wasn't speaking, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Familiar, like the pause before a storm or the breath before a kiss. Mara's gaze drifted to the water's edge, where the faint outline of a boat, small, almost like a shadow itself, floated on the calm waves, barely visible in the moonlight. It reminded her of the summers when she was younger, before the world had tangled them up in expectations and distance. Back then, the ocean had been a playground, a place to dream and escape. Now it felt like something else entirely, something deeper. She wondered if Noah felt it too, that undercurrent of life pulling them both, a thread of destiny woven into every crashing wave. After a long while, Noah spoke. His voice was quiet, but there was a steadiness to it now, like he was no longer trying to keep his past from him. but rather accepting it, feeling it as a part of himself. My brother always said the ocean never lies, he said, a bittersweet smile tugging at the corners of his lips. He used to joke that the waves could tell you everything if you just listened closely enough. Mara chuckled softly, her heart aching at the weight in his words. And what did it say to you all these years? He looked out at the dark expanse before him, his gaze distant, lost in the rhythm of the water. That I was too stubborn, he said with a small laugh, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Too proud, too afraid. Afraid? Mara asked gently, turning to face him. Afraid of what? He looked at her, his eyes soft and vulnerable now, the walls he'd built over the years crumbling bit by bit. Afraid of losing everything I had left, afraid of how much I still cared about you. Her breath caught in her chest, the unspoken words hanging between them like a thread on the verge of breaking. I never stopped caring, Mara, even when I told myself I had to, even when I thought it was better to let go. I couldn't. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself, with the truth that had been hiding beneath everything he had done. Mara felt her heart soften, a warmth spreading through her chest as she reached for his hand. You don't have to let go, Noah. You never did. For a moment they both sat in silence again, the weight of his confession settling in the air around them. The only sound was the gentle lap of waves against the pier, the steady rhythm like a heartbeat in the night. Noah squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing the back of hers in a simple, quiet gesture that said more than words ever could. His gaze dropped to the water, and for the first time he didn't seem like a man carrying the weight of the past, but someone who had finally found a piece of peace. I thought about leaving here, he said, voice low but steady. I thought about moving away, starting fresh, but something kept pulling me back. It wasn't just the town, it wasn't just the memories of my brother, it was you, Mara. The way you left a part of yourself here, the way I could feel it in the air every time the tide came in. She smiled, but it was a smile that came from deep within, like the kind of understanding that only time and love could bring. I never meant to leave you behind. I thought I had to. I thought I was meant for something else. You were, he said, his voice steady, but there was a softness in his eyes, a gentleness she hadn't seen in years. But I was always meant to be here, Mara, with you. The world seemed to quiet around them as they sat together, their hands entwined, a soft breeze tugging at the fabric of their clothes. The ocean stretched out before them, endless and mysterious, a place where the past and future could collide in the most unexpected ways. And as the moon climbed higher in the sky, its light shimmering across the water, Mara felt the weight of everything, every mistake, every unanswered question begin to lift, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no more urgency to the world, no more rushing or running, just the sound of the waves and the presence of someone who had always been there, waiting for her to come back. She tilted her head to look at Noah, his profile outlined in the soft glow of the moon, and she felt a surge of gratitude for the quiet beauty of this moment, for the way life had brought them back together when neither of them had expected it. Maybe the ocean does know something after all, she murmured, her voice a soft whisper against the night. Maybe it's trying to tell us something. Noah looked at her then, his eyes meeting hers with the clarity of someone who had finally understood the lesson the ocean had been trying to teach all along. Maybe it's trying to tell us that it's never too late, he said, his words simple but full of meaning. No matter how far we go, we always have a way back. And for the first time, as the tide rolled in and out, there was a certainty between them, a peace in knowing that they had found their way back to each other, not because the world had led them here, but because they had chosen to listen, to return to the place where it all began. The ocean whispered its approval, and as they sat there, hand in hand, the night stretched on, not as a moment of endings, but as the beginning of something new, something quiet and steady, like the sound of the waves, like the pulse of the earth beneath their feet, like the promise of tomorrow. The night deepened, the stars twinkling brightly above, as if they too were keeping watch over them, the only light in the world now coming from the soft glow of the moon and the flickering shadows cast by the pier's worn wooden beams. The air had grown cooler, but neither of them seemed to mind. They sat close, the world around them falling away like the tide, leaving them in a bubble of warmth and quiet. Noah shifted, turning slightly toward Mara, his eyes softer now, searching her face as though trying to memorize the curve of her lips, the light in her eyes, the way she seemed to fit so perfectly beside him. He leaned in just enough to brush his cheek against hers, a touch that was barely more than the brush of a breeze, but it held so much meaning, a simple gesture that spoke of years of longing, of regret, and now of possibility. "Mara," he murmured, his voice barely a breath, "do you ever wonder what we could have been if we'd stayed?" She closed her eyes at the question, the weight of it sinking into her chest. She hadn't let herself think about the what-ifs in years, not since she'd packed her life away in the city and convinced herself that it was better to move forward. But now, sitting here, her hand in his, the sea whispering to them both, she realized she had never truly let go of that question either. "I used to," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile thread between them. "I used to wonder all the time, and then I stopped. I told myself that the path I took was the one I was meant to follow, but it never felt complete. Not really, not until now." Noah's thumb brushed gently across her knuckles, his gaze steady on her. "I thought I had it all figured out, thought that staying here was all I needed. But what I didn't realize was how much I was still carrying, how much I was missing. And it wasn't just my brother, it was us." She looked at him then, her eyes meeting his with an intensity she hadn't realized was there, not until now. "You've been carrying this for all this time?" He nodded slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was keeping my life together. But every time I tried to move forward, something pulled me back. The pier, the sea, and you." A slight breeze stirred the edges of her hair, and Mara turned her face toward the ocean, listening to its song. She couldn't help but think of all the days spent apart, the miles that had stretched between them, the years that had slipped by unnoticed. But as she sat here now, the ocean's pull seemed different. It wasn't about distance anymore. It was about connection, about returning to the things that mattered most. "Noah, we've both changed. I can feel it. But I think that's okay. Maybe it was always supposed to be this way. Maybe we needed all this time apart to come back to each other whole." He studied her face for a moment, as though he were seeing her in a new light, as if trying to understand everything she'd said, everything that had been left unsaid. "Do you think it's possible?" that after everything we can start over, that we can rebuild what we lost. Her heart quickened at the thought, the possibility, the hope that had been buried deep inside her like a seed waiting to sprout. It felt both terrifying and wonderful all at once. Could they really go back after all this time? Could they find their way again after so many years of silence? I don't know, she said, her voice shaking just slightly, but I want to try. For a long moment, Noah said nothing. Instead, he took a deep breath, as though inhaling the night air and letting it settle inside him. He looked out at the water again, the gentle crash of waves against the shore, the way the moonlight danced on the surface of the ocean like 1,000 tiny reflections of stars. I guess we're both learning how to listen, aren't we? He said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. To the ocean, to ourselves, to each other. Mara smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. Maybe that's the real secret, she whispered. The ocean doesn't have answers. It just helps you listen to your heart. There was a long silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, like the world had slowed just for them, allowing them the time to gather the fragments of their lives, the broken pieces of their past, and begin to rebuild, as if the ocean itself had given them permission to finally let go of the years of waiting and yearning. They sat there for a while longer, just listening to the sound of the waves, to the quiet of the night, to the beating of their hearts that had finally found their rhythm again. And in that quiet, in that shared space, they didn't need to say anything more. But something had shifted. There was a promise between them now, one not of grand gestures or declarations, but of a quiet understanding. A promise that no matter where the tides carried them, no matter how much time had passed, they would always have this moment, this night, this ocean. It was the beginning of something new, something neither of them had expected but both desperately needed, a return not just to the place they had left, but to the parts of themselves they had hidden away, pieces of their hearts that the ocean had somehow kept safe until they were ready to come back and find them. And when Noah turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a kind of soft certainty, Mara knew that whatever happened next, they would be all right, because some things like the tide were inevitable. The ocean always returned to the shore, and tonight she had found her way back to him. The night seemed to stretch on, timeless and endless, as the gentle waves lapped against the pier, each soft ripple a reminder of the passage of time, but also of its ability to heal, to restore. Mara leaned her head against Noah's shoulder, her hand still tightly holding his. The steady rhythm of the ocean, the warmth of his presence beside her, created a space where the world felt still, where everything that had once seemed so complex was suddenly so simple. For the first time in years, Mara allowed herself to stop thinking about the future, to stop analyzing what might happen next. She closed her eyes, letting the peace of the moment fill her. Here, in this quiet corner of the world, there was no rushing, no expectations, just the present, just them. After a while, Noah shifted beside her, his voice breaking the calm in a way that felt comforting, like the first rays of morning after a long, dark night. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low but steady. "Maybe we can make a life here, together." Mara turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his in the dim night. There was no grand gesture in his words, no sweeping promises. Just a quiet invitation to step into something new, something uncertain but real. "You mean here, in Westmere?" she asked, a soft smile curling at her lips. "No," he said, shaking his head, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he squeezed her hand. Not just here, but with me, with us. Her heart fluttered at the simplicity of it, at the weight of the truth in his words. With us, it felt like a promise, not just to stay, but to live fully together with all the possibilities and uncertainties that would come. And for the first time, the idea didn't feel daunting. It felt right. The ocean stretched out before them, dark and endless, but the path ahead seemed clear. There would be more challenges, more unknowns, but tonight, in the quiet of the night and the embrace of the sea, Mara knew they were no longer alone. She nodded, her heart swelling as she whispers, I'd like that a lot. Noah leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, a simple, tender act that felt like the most natural thing in the world. They sat there for a moment, side by side, as the last traces of the night faded away, and the first light of dawn began to kiss the horizon with pale, golden fingers. The ocean, ever constant, seemed to sigh in the distance, as if in approval, its waves gently echoing the promise they had made to each other. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. They would return again and again to this moment when time stood still, to this place where everything had begun and everything at last had come full circle. And as the sun began to rise, casting a soft, pink glow over the water, Noah and Mara stood hand in hand, ready to step forward into the world that awaited them, together forever.